Benjamin Harrison arrives in American history with a paradox stitched neatly to the inside of his coat. A quiet man descended from noise. He is the grandson of a war hero president who died too soon to do much harm or much good, the son of a congressman with a frontier sense of town duty, and himself a lawyer whose sentences are careful at the edges and firm in the middle. He grows up with the knowledge that his name is already a quotation and decides early that the only answer to inherited echo is unshowy competence. Born in North Bend, Ohio in 1833, he spends his first years under the long shadow of William Henry Harrison's fame and the short shadow of that fame's brevity. The family moves to Indiana, where weather and work combine to build the sort of character that lacks adjectives. He reads law under established hands, marries Caroline Scott, earnest, musical, attentive to improvement, and settles in Indianapolis to make a living by making arguments that judges can trust. His voice is clear without being theatrical. His industry is the kind that makes clerks smile. His piety is a daily grammar rather than a sermon delivered at strangers. If you are looking for a figure destined to belt a nation into a new shape, you will miss him at first glance. If you are looking for a figure designed to keep the machine of law from rattling itself apart, he is almost ideal. The war calls and reveals in him a reserve of iron, not immediately evident in the office light. He organizes a regiment, the 70th Indiana, recruits, drills, and learns quickly that courage is a distribution problem. You must move it down the line until the least certain man has just enough to walk forward. He serves under Sherman in the Atlanta campaign and the March to the Sea, learns staff work and boldness at the same time, and is promoted to brigadier general near the end for a steadiness that soldiers understand better than newspapers. He is not a glorious battlefield character. He is a commander with a habit of making the necessary thing appear inevitable. When the uniforms go away, he returns to the bar with gratitude and without sentimentality. He prosecutes and defends. He reads briefs like a carpenter reads lumber. He invests his energy not in becoming famous, but in becoming reliable. The state notices. Indiana is the sort of place where a lawyer with a backbone, a Sunday coat, and a lack of vices can become a senator without insulting anyone's intelligence. In 1881, he is elected to the United States Senate. He brings with him a belief that the Constitution is a living engine only insofar as fuel and maintenance are not neglected. He is no thunderer on the floor, but the Senate is a body that can be seduced by competence. He speaks clearly on tariffs, veterans' pensions, and the developing idea that America must treat its industrial future as a civic question rather than a private miracle. He believes in a protective tariff because he believes in the payroll it protects. He believes in pensions because he believes the war's debt is moral as well as fiscal. He believes in a navy one can sail beyond the sketchbook. He is defeated for re-election by a state legislature temporarily allergic to his party, but the defeat leaves him unbruised. He returns to practice and to the sort of civic leadership that is so regular it resists headlines. In 1888, the Republican Convention, tangled between factions and tired of the reflexive glamour that attaches to certain names, turns to him. A Union veteran, a dependable senator, a lawyer who can explain a tariff schedule without insulting a farmer, and, not least, a Harrison whose claim is character rather than nostalgia. The campaign that follows is conducted with organized courtesy. He stays on his porch in Indianapolis and delivers arguments instead of theatrics. Behind the scenes, party managers run one of the most efficient operations in 19th century politics, reminding the world that arithmetic is a texture of democracy. He loses the popular vote and wins the electoral one, a result that will sound familiar to later generations, and is sworn in with the expression of a man who understands both the dignity of the job and the mischief vibrant inside it. He inherits a country both exuberant and anxious. Railroads have stitched the map into a single garment. Factories have learned to speak in numbers. Fortunes have learned to grow faster than reputations. Farmers feel the squeeze between rates and markets. Labor feels the squeeze between hours and hunger. The South is busy reinterpreting the war's verdict into local ordinances. The West is walking towards its last open spaces with surveyor's chains in its pockets. Harrison's instinct, conservative in the old sense of conserving institutions to make progress possible, leads him to strengthen the apparatus of law so that it can referee the modern. He begins with something Americans will spend a century debating: the relationship between national government and industrial power. When the Sherman Antitrust Act reaches his desk in 1890, he signs it not with utopian faith that Congress has magically purified markets, but with the sober belief that the country needs a statement in statute. Combinations in restraint of trade are an injury to the public and will be pursued in federal courts. The law is skeletal. Its teeth are small. Enforcement will spasm and nap for years, but the principle moves from editorials to the U.S. Code. He has given future reformers a legal spine. The same Congress sends him the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, a compromise between gold discipline and silver advocacy that requires the Treasury to buy millions of ounces of silver each month and issue notes that can be redeemed in gold. He signs it because politics is a series of partial lodgings on the way to a destination, and because Western and Southern votes, like arithmetic, do not disappear because one wishes them to. The measure will haunt his successors when confidence falters and gold reserves dip. For the moment, it quiets a currency quarrel that threatened to turn every store counter into a referendum. The McKinley Tariff of 1890, the crown of Republican economic doctrine, sets protective rates high and creates a new lever in reciprocity: authority to lower duties on countries that drop theirs against American goods. Harrison embraces the strategy. He believes, genuinely, that American labor is not a commodity to be sacrificed to price lists that flatter importers. And he believes that trade agreements negotiated with dignity can open markets without sabotaging wages. The tariff's sudden heights will sting consumers and anger farmers. Democrats will make of grocery bills a referendum in 1890 and 1892. Yet the reciprocity design, invented for its time, begins to sketch a language later administrations will speak fluently. While economists and editors argue, an institutional revolution unfolds in the House, and Harrison is lucky to share the stage with the one man who could conduct it. Thomas Brackett Reed, the Speaker, breaks the minority's power to paralyze with the disappearing quorum, counts members present even when they refuse to answer roll call, and makes the House a machine efficient enough to pass the laws an industrial nation requires. Enemies call it autocracy, friends call it government. Harrison does not write the rules, he benefits from their seriousness. The result is a Congress that spends robustly and legislates boldly. Critics will coin the phrase billion-dollar Congress as if the number were a confession. Harrison and his allies wear it as a sign that the country will invest in veterans, in infrastructure, in an administrative state capable of more than sentiment. The Dependent and Disability Pension Act of 1890 expands benefits for Union veterans and their families, converting gratitude into checks that buy food and teach a republic how to translate honor into policy. It is generous, messy at the margins, and inescapably just. The Census Office is upgraded and professionalized. The Department of Agriculture becomes a cabinet department. The Weather Bureau begins to give farmers the only kind of prophecy that matters to corn. These are not fireworks, they are foundations. On civil rights, Harrison displays a bravery of intent not matched by numbers in the Senate. He uses annual messages and private pressure to support the Federal Elections Bill, often called the Lodge Bill, which would have provided federal supervision of congressional elections in districts where citizens asked for it. The plan aims to protect black voters in the South against tricks so familiar they had become local weather: stuffed boxes, missing ballots, tally sheets edited by men with pistols. The House passes it. The Senate, crowded with other priorities and populated by men who prefer reconciliation to justice when the two appear to conflict, lets it die. Harrison is not a prophet who abandons the remainder of his program to make a single gesture. He continues to appoint black office holders where openings allow, continues to denounce lynching in words that read now, like the lonely conscience of a government not yet equipped with statutes and will. He appoints Frederick Douglass minister resident and consul general to Haiti, an emblem and a working diplomat, and supports a treaty effort in the Caribbean that stumbles over Haitian pride and American clumsiness. He is the sort of executive who, when he cannot force a door, looks for windows. In the South, most were boarded. Foreign policy under Harrison is an essay in adult confidence, not belligerence, not abdication. He and his Secretary of State, first James G. Blaine and then John W. Foster, pressed the Pan-American idea beyond sentiment into machinery. The first International Conference of American States meets in Washington in 1889 to 1890. The delegates argue, dine, negotiate, and in the end, create a permanent commercial bureau that will become the Pan-American Union. Reciprocity treaties follow with Latin republics. A rudimentary habit of arbitration is encouraged. American capital begins to travel south with fewer sermons as luggage. In the Pacific, the Samoan crisis, three powers jostling over a small archipelago, threatens to break masts and treaties. Harrison's administration navigates Germany's bluster and a late hurricane, arrives at a three-power condominium that is ungainly but bloodless, and preserves America's standing without buying a war it doesn't need. The Bering Sea fur seal controversy with Britain, which begins with seizures and lectures about pelagic sealing and ends with arbitration, teaches the United States a lesson it will keep learning, that conservation is international or it is failure. The Baltimore incident in Chile, where a brawl becomes a diplomatic crisis after sailors are killed by a hostile crowd, calls for firmness without theatrical vengeance. Harrison demands apology and indemnity and gets both, proving that a country can insist on respect without searching for flags to plant. At home, the map changes under his hand, as if a child had dumped a box of star stickers on a wall chart. In 1889 and 1890, 6 new states enter the Union: North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Washington, Idaho, Wyoming, an avalanche of admission without precedent. Their constitutions arrive like new neighbors. Their senators arrive like new arithmetic. The American West, once a geography, becomes a polity. Oklahoma Territory opens to settlement with the famous land run of 1889, a spectacle of human desire turned into dust and flags. And Harrison, for all his commitments to order, understands that some national scenes are improvised because the century itself is improvisation. At the same time, he places, almost silently, 2 of the most important keystones in the arch of American conservation: the General Revision Act of 1891, carrying within it the Forest Reserve Clause, permits the president to set aside public timberlands as reserves. Harrison uses it with a steady pen, withdrawing millions of acres from the immediate logic of the sawmill. And 1890 sees the creation of new national parks and monuments in California: Sequoia, General Grant, now part of Kings Canyon, and Yosemite, where the Republic admits that certain sublimities are better handled by poetry and perimeter than by purchase. The Navy, which had withered into a flotilla of wooden memories, begins its steel adolescence under Harrison. The ABCD cruisers, conceived earlier, are joined by a sequence of modern ships. Appropriations rise. The logic of global trade and protection begins to acquire hull and gun rather than oratory alone. Harrison is no swashbuckler. He sees that a nation with oceanic interests cannot depend on heroism to tow its commerce. He is, in this sense, a builder of rooms he will never occupy. Later presidents will exercise power Harrison helped purchase. Improvements also touch entrance doors. Ellis Island opens in 1892 as a federal immigration station, a functional acknowledgement that the Republic's welcome must be accompanied by process. The law does not yet have the cruelty that the 20th century will sometimes teach it. It has, however, a new sense of national responsibility. Harrison's administration enforces exclusions already on the books and signs the Geary Act, extending Chinese exclusion in a form more stringent than the first compromise. He does it after vetoing a harsher version and after making clear that treaty obligations matter. But the fact remains: anti-Chinese politics are now federal habit. His signature is part of a longer moral failure that too many decent men rationalize as necessity. He speaks about it with restraint rather than repentance. The restraint reads, here, as a limit. The White House under Harrison looks and sounds like a house run by adults. He and Caroline bring to it a domestic sobriety, music on the right nights, and an orderliness that treats staff as professionals rather than as props. Electricity arrives. The family learns the new fear of light switches that bite. The executive mansion begins the transition from 19th century parlor to 20th century workplace. Caroline's illness, tuberculosis, darkens the final season of his term with a grief that is both private and public as the country watches a president keep his schedule while his companion fades. Her death in October 1892 muffles the campaign's last weeks and reveals in him the stubbornness of duty that soldiers will recognize instantly. He will marry again, to Mary Dimmock, years later, a choice that will irritate a few and satisfy the many who prefer a widower living rather than embalming himself. If these paragraphs sound like an ode to construction, they should. This is the work Harrison prefers. Building and tending frameworks that will last longer than his name in schoolbooks. But a presidency must live under weather as well as architecture, and the weather in 1890 turns against him. The McKinley tariff raises prices faster than wages in certain households and makes Republicans the authors of every shopkeeper's complaint. The Democrats hammer the billion-dollar Congress and translate governance into caricature. These men take your money and give it to someone else's friend. The midterms punish his party with a ferocity that feels personal and is not. The endorsement of civil service and pensions and steel ships and Western states cannot save a majority when kitchen tables feel lighter. Harrison, no demagogue, refuses to pretend the tariff is a toy. He defends it with reason and invites people to judge him on arithmetic instead of appetite. The electorate answers the invitation in 1892 by returning Grover Cleveland to the chair, a rare instance of two capable, serious men exchanging the office twice. Harrison yields without complaint and without melodrama. He is loyal to the constitutional sentence that says presidents are tenants, not owners. Back in Indianapolis, he returns to law and to a kind of elder statesmanship that fits him better than many might expect. He writes and argues cases, including an appearance before the Supreme Court that reminds the country what an unflashy first-rate advocate looks like, and spends time on arbitration conferences that appeal to his sense of order as a moral instrument. He opposes free silver with the same patient energy with which he had accepted a compromise while in office. His eye stays on the credit of the Republic and on the working men whose savings, he insists, should not be melted by theories. He lectures, travels, and writes in a prose that resembles his speeches, unmetaphorical, cordial, and mindful of the line between conviction and insult. He dies in 1901, the century newly turned, the country already a world power equipped with some of the tools he helped forge. How to weigh him? Begin with what he built, not with what he failed to inflame. He did not invent a creed, he operationalized decency. He presided over the most prolific statehood wave since the founding. He set aside forests before it was popular to do anything for trees. He planted steel where romance had loved oak. He pushed reciprocity and arbitration, as if he believed that grown nations should learn to speak in contracts as well as in canons. He expanded veterans. Pensions beyond what penny counters considered comfortable, because he thought gratitude should have an accountant's line as well as a poet's line. He supported a federal elections bill that would have made the ballot safer for citizens whose right had been changed into a rumor. He lost the vote and kept his temper. He blessed a House revolution that made lawmaking less performative and more productive. Critics call that autocracy only until they need a statute. He signed an antitrust law that began as promise and would take decades to mature into pressure. The distance between 1890 and later trust-busting presidents is not measured in holiness, but in the accumulation of will around a framework he endorsed. He enlarged the civil service and the administrative imagination in dozens of quiet ways that do not invite statues. The things built under him do not glitter, they hold. To finish the ledger fairly. Whist the limits. The McKinley Tariff's ambition overshot the voters' tolerance for grocery mathematics. It amplified the sense that Republican doctrine was a banker's diagram handed to a homesteader at supper time. The Silver Compromise postponed a showdown at the expense of configuration. It left his successors with a puzzle that would, under stress, look like a cliff. The effort to secure black suffrage by federal supervision was allowed to die in a Senate where both parties flinched. Harrison could not make courage contagious. The extension and hardening of Chinese exclusion put his name on the wrong side of a line that the better angels of the Republic kept trying to redraw. The country's appetite for scapegoats was strong, and the Constitution's protection did not extend to men most newspapers treated as problems. In labor, his administration's record was less dramatic than his successors, but the culture of using federal injunctions would grow into a habit that made unions fear the seal as much as they feared the baton. He was not a tribune of the poor or a poet of the dispossessed. He was a lawyer of the Commonwealth. His morality was institutional rather than lyrical. Because he is not a man who raises his voice, memory can underrate him. Yet watch the lines that run from his desk to later decades. The conservation movement will name larger preserves and hire its profits, but the legal power to reserve forests begins as a sentence in a bill he signed and as a habit he practiced. The Navy whose steel ribs he approved will, 2 administrations later, become the instrument of a new foreign posture. Without his appropriations, later parades are smaller. The Pan-American architecture will grow from a bureau into an institution that survives wars and moods. The antitrust suit remains possible because the federal government first learned to speak the language of competition as a matter of the public interest. The House's ability to legislate without consenting to be paralyzed will wax and wane. But the proof that a majority can govern without apologizing for mathematics will be cited and cursed in turn. Reed's rules becoming a phrase of worship or denigration depending on who needs a vote. And the veterans' pension policy, generous and abused in pockets like every human system, sets a precedent for federal responsibility toward those who risk the state's life to preserve it. When later generations debate social insurance, they will be doing so in a house built in part on that foundation. There is a domestic scene that captures him more completely than statistics can. Imagine a winter evening in the White House, the rooms warmed by new electric light. That he is reluctant to switch on or off because he has seen what untamed currents can do. On the desk, a draft letter instructing the Navy to accept a lower bid only if the steel meets the new specification. A memorandum from the Interior about a proposed forest reserve boundary, and a map spread like a quilt. A long letter to a friend explaining why the federal elections bill is not tyranny, but a way for a Republican government to keep its oaths. A note from Blaine arguing for one more reciprocity clause and the political geometry required to pass it. A message from the Treasury reporting on silver purchases and a reserve figure written in a careful hand. He reads, annotates, and edits. He uses a pencil the way a good lawyer uses a question. He changes may to shall once and shall to may twice, which is the exact distribution demanded by a world in which discretion is sometimes justice and sometimes a loophole. He rises when Caroline enters. They speak briefly about the music room's schedule. He returns to the desk and writes a marginal note that a clerk will study in the morning and a historian will never read. That note improves a policy by 2%, and the 2% becomes the difference between a law that works and a law that merely performs. He is, in short, a president for adults. For citizens who understand that the work of a republic is as much maintenance as it is miracle, as much schedule as it is spectacle. He does not flatter the people with impossible promises. He asks them to respect institutions and to let those institutions evolve in directions that secure liberty's boring necessities. Uniform rules, predictable enforcement, adequate tools, an executive who signs his name to things that matter and knows when not to sign his name to things that merely make a noise. He believes that the Constitution is not a relic to be worshipped or a wax nose to be twisted. but a machine to be oiled and used. He is neither the best rhetorician of his era, nor the most beloved politician. He is one of its soundest engineers. In the end, the measure of Benjamin Harrison is not how many episodes bear his name, but how many continuities do. If you seek thunder, go to other biographies. If you seek the method by which a rural federation became an urban, continental, commercial republic without tearing its charter to shreds, keep him on the shelf within reach. He reminds us that presidential greatness sometimes wears a small lapel flower and speaks in complete paragraphs. He reminds us that bills passed in one season can become the weather of the next century. He reminds us that decency, though it rarely sells newspapers, is a form of courage. He reminds us, too, that decency has limits, and that a serious man can err in the direction of caution when justice required an adjective he could not yet say loudly enough. When history pauses between louder chapters and listens for the hum of machinery still running, it will hear his administration in the bearings, a smoother house, a sturdier civil service, a treasury walking a taut line without falling, a navy in rehearsal for modernity, forests saved from the present in favor of the future, 6 stars added to the flag in an avalanche that rewrote the map, a courthouse language of competition born in federal ink, and a set of presidential messages that treated the public like grown-ups and expected them to act accordingly. That is not a small music. It is the sound of government doing what it was built to do, signed by a man whose vanity was small and whose signature is still legible where it should be, on the inside of institutions that last.
Midnight rails under silver moon, dusty boots on a winding road. A shadow's the only friend I've known since she packed up and let me go. Empty whiskey bottle on the seat, her laugh still echoes in my bones. Saddle's heavy with memories. I ride alone where the wind still blows. Nowhere else to be, nowhere else to be, nowhere else to be. Nowhere else to be, nowhere else to be, nowhere else to be. Sunrise paints the horizon gold, but it don't warm a lonesome soul. Every town I pass feels half her size. Every trail's haunted by goodbye. I whisper prayers to open skies, hoping someday my heart'll find a brand new path beyond the pain, where broken hearts can heal in time. Nowhere else to be, nowhere else to be, nowhere else to be. Nowhere else to be, nowhere else to be. Nowhere else to be. be. Nowhere else to be. Nowhere else to be. Nowhere else to be.